All right, what's going on, everybody? This is Barbell Therapy. You have Dwayne and you have Aaron, Barbell Fit. Just a quick recap from our last episode. We talked about a little bit about stress. We talked about RPE, which is rate of perceived exertion. Lots of good info there. If you haven't checked it out, please go back, check the links. Today, we're talking about exercise progression. We're going to hit on a little bit of varieties, different movement screenings and our opinions on that. And if we have time, we're going to get into a little bit about prioritization. You know, we all have a limited amount of time and we want to get the most bang for our buck, so to speak, in the gym and in other areas. So, hey, Barbell, you ready? We're just going to jump right into it.
Yeah, we can go for it. Let me before we even jump into that, let me throw this story at you. Okay. That way we can kind of set the tone for the ultimate goal that we want to have everyone take away from. So essentially, this happened just this past week. So I think it's really applicable and a perfect time to bring it up because no matter what we talk about, the ultimate goal is to kind of have what I experienced this week play out with everyone else, hopefully. So pretty rough week in terms of just life and everything that was going on with work and stressors and all that, things that we talked about last time, that the internal loading, if you will. Wednesday morning, woke up. I hate to sound old, even though I'm not. Woke up, I sneezed, and I threw my back out. Right? Can't even make that up. So I mean, like, I don't mean just like kind of tweaked it. I mean like got down on all fours and couldn't move. Threw my back out. Right. The first thing that I had to do, even though I was ill and annoyed and irritated, that's just kind of how I respond to things, is I'm always grumpy when stuff like this happens. But even with that mentality, the first thing that I had to do was rationalize everything, right? I was in pain, I was locked up, but I told myself, a sneeze didn't structurally do anything. There's nothing actually wrong with me. Essentially, how complex pain is, that's for people with a lot more degrees and education than me. All I knew is that my back was locked up, but there was nothing truly wrong with me, right? I was essentially just surprised my body and had a reaction. So started getting moving, hurt like hell. As I moved a little bit more, pain started to ease up a little bit. I wish the story ended there, but thank God it didn't, because it makes for better testimony. Went throughout the whole work day miserable, back locked up, couldn't move hardly, tried to move as much as I could, but kept reassuring myself throughout the day, to combat the internal stressors, right? That there was nothing actually wrong with me. I was just having a response, that tight locked up feeling, because a sneeze isn't going to do anything. So kept moving. End of the day came, still felt bad. Woke up the next morning, Thursday, a little bit better. So already there's some progression. So I took that mentality and understanding that, things were already feeling better, even though it was super painful still, like had to crawl out of bed again. But there was progress, and I paid attention to that. So this would be Thursday, and Thursday was another training day for me again, right? So my back's thrown out, and I knew I had to train. So I kept moving more and more, tried to move more than I did the day before. Got off work, still progressively feeling better. I knew, again, I kept reassuring myself there's nothing structurally wrong with me. So I went to the gym, and I hit the weights that I was supposed to hit verbatim, no miss, no adjustments needed. Because I had reassured myself, and this wasn't abuse. This wasn't like me pushing through the pain. This was like reassuring myself that everything was okay. And I warmed up my workups, my workup weights. Everything was fine. Pain was there, but not increasing. I wasn't aggravating that. And I went through the entire workout, executed it to the T, hit every set, rep, weight. pain didn't go away, but it didn't increase. And, you know, it was just like we talked about last time. Like, you're not always going to have a perfect day in the gym, but that doesn't mean you still can't hit everything you need to hit.
Right.
So I hit that, and then woke up this morning, still a little bit of pain. And by the end of the day, I went to my workout and I hit a recent PR, if you will. Not a lifetime, but a recent. Went in there and picked up just a few hours ago a 500-pound deadlift, right? So I say all this because I woke up this morning with back pain. I missed my second cup of coffee, which is a nice routine to prep me for the gym. I grabbed a barbell that wasn't the original barbell that I wanted. It was a little thicker. I could have used all of these little things to just totally screw up my lift or ruin what I had planned, or I could have just like gotten rid of the emotions and just been neutral and did what I did the day before, warmed up and hit what I was supposed to hit. So it's insane how much that your mentality and your self-education to rationalize everything can change. I mean, Wednesday, I couldn't stand on my own 2 feet from debilitating back pain. And Friday afternoon, I hit a 500-pound deadlift. You know what I mean? Like, it's important that we don't let the simple things consume us, even though that they can temporarily be drastic. So,
Right.
Super motivating, and definitely, it's one thing to accomplish what you had planned for the day. It's another thing to accomplish what you had planned with some adversity to it. You know, it makes it that much more sweeter. So definitely a huge psychosocial factor and boost of morale. But then also physiologically, I'm still on track. I didn't miss a beat, even though it's a little bit of pain, a missed coffee session, bad barbell. You know, you can let that stuff ruin your training, or you can just knock out your training and not have to worry about it. So
right, and that touches on a couple things, and I wanted to highlight a couple things that I heard. So number one is, just like we talked about last time about the concept of no pain, no gain. We want to be certain to reassure everyone that pain is a powerful tool. It's a good indicator, but we don't take pain lightly. So the thing that you said that I really want to highlight is you had a reasonable amount of confidence that there wasn't anything structurally wrong. You said that a couple times. You felt that there was not anything physiologically wrong structurally that needed medical intervention or anything like that. It's like, hey, I had this freak occurrence. I tweaked something. I moved in a way that my body may not have been prepared for at the time, and now I have to deal with the consequences of that singular act. But there is not some. I didn't tear a muscle. I didn't strain anything. I didn't sprain anything. I didn't, and we can talk about that. I'm not a medical professional by any.
right. I think the takeaway is just like keep context in mind. You know, like we're not trying to like
Right.
tell you what you need to do with your pain, but the point of it's not to focus on the pain. The point is like, did I break my leg and there's a bone sticking out of my body pain, or did I sneeze and something? You know, context. Like, because and I say that because we'll associate that pain with the equivalent of like, oh my God, my leg's sticking out of my body.
Right.
You know, but
and I need to work through.
We step back and we realize, hey, you sneezed this morning.
Right.
Sucky luck, but you're fine. Like, just drive on and deal with the deal with the issue as it comes.
And the thing there is, we can talk about the difference between real pain and discomfort and stuff like that. You know, if there's a medical emergency, and this is something that, to me, and I've learned to stop using the word common sense. I find that that's not always
no,
as what I think it is. So
that word is dead.
Right. So I I don't use the word common sense anymore, but I will say let's be reasonable. Let's be sensible.
There you go.
If something is swollen, if something is, if it's like really out of the ordinary, that to the point that it's affecting your life so much that you really need to get it checked out by a professional.
Right.
But so that I wanted to point that out. Another couple things that, something that we talked about last time that is so integral, and I'm actually having to look at it for my own program, is you had a planned workout that day. So and this goes into what we talked about last time about the difference between training and exercise, or any of the other definitions that we might use, or descriptions that we might use for going to work out. It's like you had a plan of how you were training your body that week.
Right.
And you had this singular incident that threw things off a little bit, but the fact that you had the plan in place meant that you could do what you can to stick to the plan.
Right.
In the absence of that plan, then it's real easy to just throw it out.
Thrown to the wind.
It's like there wasn't a plan anyway. So it's like, okay, today I feel like crap and I don't feel like working out. Well, all of us have moments where we don't feel like working out, or where we don't feel like doing something that we know that we should do.
Right.
So the fact of the matter is, having a plan in place kind of keeps us, it has a built-in sense of accountability there. Like
absolutely. So it's auto-regulation there.
Right. So the other thing is, I like to stay in the mental side of the house, and that what you described was a bit of resilience. You talked about some positive self-talk, and because and this is just, hey, we're being open and honest in a sense of full disclosure. I mean, there were times where I got to the gym and realized I forgot to charge my iPod, and was like, oh man, so I guess that's it for today, man. I might as well go to the crib.
Yeah, that's the cherry on top to just ruin the day.
Right. But of course, nowadays it's like, because there are always those little things that, and sometimes something that might normally be a slight annoyance. Okay, now it's like, okay, this is the straw that broke the camel's back. It's like,
right.
It's like
perfect way to put it.
Right. You get to the gym and it's like, oh man, I forgot my gym socks. So I'm working out in church socks, flip flops. I forgot my gym shorts. So it's like, okay, now so I'm wearing my blue jeans, or it's like this stuff happens.
Yeah.
It's how do we react to it? What can you do to try to stick to the plan? Well, first of all, there had to have been a plan in place to begin with.
Yep.
And then it's like, because there are other things that happen. There have been times that I got to the gym and found out that the gym was celebrating a holiday that I didn't know about. And it's like, okay, so that workout can't get done. What can I get done in the time that I have available, or
right.
What other options do I have available? And that's something that I've definitely had to incorporate into my program, is always having, at least being aware of an alternate plan, being aware of a plan B, just in case something doesn't work out. Worst case scenario, I could do something right here at the house.
Sure.
I have a minimal amount of equipment. I have a couple kettlebells. I have a jump rope. So worst case scenario, I can just work out at the house, if I needed to.
Still add to the 401k, still
right.
Still putting the money in.
Put them in the account. Right. So yeah, that's a great story, and that's something that we did not make explicit about, and I think this is something that we both agree on as far as our goals for the podcast, is I don't want to be that wise person up on the mountaintop that's just shouting information down.
We're in the trenches too.
Right. We're down here in the trench too. We're still learning stuff, and we still have bad days, and that's where you have to start learning to put some pieces in place, have some people around you that keep you accountable. Have your workout planned out, written down, ready to go. Have your meals planned out, ready to go. So because it's so easy to have something happen that kind of throws off the plan, and it's too easy to just throw the whole plan out. And if you do that once, maybe not a big deal. If you make it a habit,
That's how it starts. You do
right,
it once, and then
right,
that's that slippery slope.
right. But so that's a great intro to what we're talking about today. So
Yeah, that's an intro, and we haven't even gotten into the meat and potatoes.
right.
That's good though.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we can jump right on in with the exercise progression / variety. So,
Yeah. So this is a real touchy topic for me, just because there's so many underlying issues with it, outside of just outside of just being what's better, what's worse. But there's just a lot of issues that I have with what's truly helping a person. So, anyways, when talking about exercise progression as a priority over exercise variety, what I'm talking about is that there's a lot of um, flashiness out there, a lot of quick fixes. Hey, association of X exercise for Y problem, association of this exercise for this problem. It's a quick fix mentality. However, they've when I say they, I mean the society as a whole. It's this mentality to almost show complexity and advancement, to like, hey, this is such a special and unique thing, and it hits this particular part of the body in a certain way, and it's correlated to fixing this arbitrary problem that you have. Right? There's a focus on giving you a list of exercises for a list of essentially fake problems. Whereas there's a lot of reasons for this. One can be just ignorance, but a lot of the times, and what I wanted to focus on the most, because we can go down so many routes, but I want to stay focused and honed in, is that from my experience, what I've seen is it's simply a lack of coaching, right? The art of coaching movement tends to be either lost, never developed, or there's an ADHD to it. Nobody wants to stick around to focus on it. So, what I mean is, somebody can't squat, and instead of working on their squat, instead of developing their squat, instead of coaching them, instead of adjusting them, instead of showing that it's okay that we didn't get that squat perfect that day, that we come back the next day and we work on it again, and then we have a planned progression. Perhaps the person's physically just too weak to do a squat, right? So that they have to start on a leg press, or they have to start on, holding on to a TRX and going through the movement, right? But we're coaching them, and it can be tedious, and it can be time consuming. But that's where the mature coach and the mature vision comes in, is that I'm not worried about right now. I see where this whole process is going to develop, right? Right now you can't do anything, but I see where this is going to go. I see that you are going to be able to learn how to squat. You are going to be able to do it under your own body weight. We will be able to get you to a barbell. And all these are going to have their own issues, but we're going to just stay focused to it, and we're going to hone in, and I'm going to coach you through this. Whereas the mentality in a lot of places is you come in, oh, hey, you can't squat. Oh, well, I just told you to squat. You can't do this. You can't do that. Oh, Well, it's because you have X, Y, and Z problem. Here's a list of corrective exercises, specialty exercises that have nothing to do with the movement, but that you're going to do on the side that I can charge you for and sell you on. And it looks really advanced because we're fixing all these quote unquote complex issues. And then, it just leads into a plethora of other issues when all that needs to be done is the time taken to work on that person's squat. I can't tell you how many times I've heard the cop out. That's exactly the word I want to use. The cop out excuse of, oh, you don't have mobility to do this. Well, no, they probably just don't have the strength to do this right now, but you don't have that mature vision to see that where they're at now and how you can place them and needing to progress. Right. So, the overarching theme is that we're missing the fundamental reason for exercise, and that's to develop the body, right? To change the body. Changing the body comes with an accumulation process, right? This is biological stress recovery adaptation. This comes from repeated effects. This comes from managing loads. This comes from a titration and a mature vision, right? The body doesn't hear what we hear when it comes to specialty exercises. The body just sees, was it a stimulus? Was it not a stimulus? Am I encountering it again, or am I not encountering it again? And was it even worth anything?
Right. Let me jump in there.
Yeah, go for it.
So you said so much. So let's
tell you it's a touchy subject for me. Break it down.
I can tell. So let's go back and chew on a little bit, chew on that stuff a little bit.
Go for it.
So you a couple buzzwords that you talked about. You said fundamental. So when we start talking about fundamentals, and this is something that I learned in psychology, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but there's a fundamental belief that I learned through my training in psychology, that we always go for the simplest explanation. Point blank. Simple is always preferred to complex. Mm-hmm. So in what way can we look at this situation or this problem or whatever in the simplest way possible? So to adapt that to fitness, etc., you talked about the stress recovery adaptation cycle. So to bring that home, possibly for our listeners, we have a person that comes in the gym, they can't execute a proper squat. It's because they've never had to execute a proper squat before.
Bingo.
That's it.
That's
it. Simple. You can't squat because you've never squatted. Point blank. How do we fix the problem? We teach you how to squat. We start with adaptation, or we start with the least amount of weight as possible, the least amount of stimulus as possible. So maybe you do a body weight squat. Maybe you use, like you said, a TRX band. Maybe you hold on to something for stability, to where we see that you're executing the movement properly. Your body starts to use muscles and starts to move in ways that it's not used to moving, and you will start noticing those gains like immediately.
Right.
So the issue, and I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I try to convince myself that there aren't people out there that are just selling bogus products just to line their own pockets. I try to look at it that way. So
I used to be naive, but now I think it's just like where the fitness industry is at now. I mean, I used to think it was a money thing, but now I just think it's complete ignorance. I mean, right. It's truly there's so much assumption in the basics that, and when I say basics, I don't mean like easy. There's so much assumption in the fundamentals that they're completely glassed over, and now nobody knows the fundamentals. Nobody, they're jumping into the complex when they don't even. They're right. Trying to run before they've ever even learned the mechanics of crawling.
Right. And it's what happens
ridiculous.
because so I like the way you sum that up. So it's not that, to go back to what I said, it's not that we are people who are purposely pumping out deceptive information in order to get paid. It's that they have lost their center, they have lost their foundation, or they never had it to begin.
If they had, or they never had it, right?
They never had it to begin with. So for you or I to sit there and say, hey, this is not a complex problem. It's like this is about as simple a problem as can be, and it has a very simple solution. See, the problem with that is, at some point, we have a lot of people who, and I'm trying not to be facetious or not to be arrogant or anything about it, but we have a lot of people who become specialists at something.
Right.
They spend a lot of money to become a specialist at that thing, and now they have to justify the fact that they are a specialist.
Bingo.
So it's like, okay, client X cannot execute a proper squat because they have hip mobility, they have ankle mobility problems, they have knee mobility problems, and yada yada yada. So let me put them through this complex, very specific exercise regimen that is going to loosen up and strengthen the Achilles tendons so that they can execute this squat properly. It's just,
it's a stretch.
Right. It's literally and figuratively. It's just, it goes against the concept of simplicity.
Right. And simplicity needs to be understood. Simplicity is always for the client. And I think this is where a lot of coaches lose it because they don't have the understanding of coaching movement. They've never had an appreciation for it, so they don't understand that it's not simple, that it's extremely complex. How it's presented to the client should be simple, but the process of adaptation and programming and progression is extremely complex, but we present it so that it's not complex, so that it's easily executed. However, that doesn't, there's almost like an insecurity with these coaches because they're not focusing on a program or progression, that it doesn't get the flash going. It doesn't get their ability to intellectually show off their $5 words and all this fancy stuff. But I don't want to go down the negativity hole too much. I just want to focus on the fact that progression needs to be the priority to the actual movement before you even contemplate a bunch of arbitrary side exercises that won't have translation.
Okay, so let's keep it real for a minute. You're a trainer, I'm a trainer. As a trainer, a client comes to me and I want to tell them that I can help them meet their fitness goals with some very simple movements. And we'll that's a whole separate podcast where we talk about the primary movements, secondary movements, and stuff like that.
Right.
So as a trainer, how do I sell the value of my services once my client knows that, okay, you can get the results you want with 4 basic movements. So as a trainer, how do I sell that to the client? Like, once I teach them the 4 basic movements, then they don't need me anymore, theoretically.
No. So one, the movement's always going to break down with different loadings. 2, there's always going to be, right, we're never going to stick to just the 4 basic movements. We're going to need a bunch of directly associated complementary exercises for those movements after the fact that those movements are established, progressed, things are trending upwards, right? That's where a lot of it gets lost. They think that it's just as simple as teaching this movement and then boom, it's done. And that's why it's so easy and simple. It's not. It's teaching the movement. It's correcting the movement. It's progressing the movement. It's seeing the movement break down again under more loads. It's seeing where it's breaking down, why it's breaking down, adjusting the load there for it, adding in supplementary large exercises to it, right? Not these arbitrary, random, unassociated correctives. You're always going to need a coach and a programmer because you're continually adapting, and because that continual adaptation, it's an extremely fluid process. You need a coach and a program on day one or on day 200 just as much as you need it on day one, because it's ever changing, it's ever evolving, and it needs to be focused and honed in on, right? As we progress, those distractors, those flashy lights become more and more, not less and less. And so having that coach and that filter to keep the true path going, which is the person's results, right? It's not about like being a meathead and trying to get everyone to these 4 big lifts and just lift heavy. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with giving them the most bang for their buck, and not feeding them excuses because we don't know how to progress them anymore.
So, and on that note, I want to talk a little bit about, and maybe you have a better term for it. What I wrote down is transference, and what I mean by that, and by all means, jump in if there's another term that kind of better describes what I'm talking about. And I guess I should probably sum this up with a personal story. So, a couple years ago, I took a liking to the Olympic lifts, and I found out that I had some mobility issues that hindered some of my lifts. So, in an effort to try to address that, I became interested in all types of different mobility things, and you see advertisements for them all the time, and for lack of a better word, I see guys and girls kind of crawling around on the floor doing like little like acrobatic little things and taking their body through all of these different complex movements. It looks very fluid. It looks impressive. However, and this is something that you and I have talked pretty extensively about, the question is, how much does that activity transfer to what I'm trying to do?
Right. That's exactly the point. That's exactly the word. What's the transfer to this? And the fact is, like the evidence that, and it's not just like me saying, no, I don't believe in it. I mean, there's legitimate evidence and research out there, right? The specific stretching is good for that specific range of motion you just went through. For example, the sit and reach test, right? That's one of the most profound tests out there, and thus a lot of data behind it. The sit and reach test and stretching for the sit and reach makes you better at the sit and reach. It doesn't transfer to anything else, right? Stretching on my hip flexor with one knee up in a runner's stretch is not going to transfer into somehow opening me up for a squat. And I say this because there's a lot of distraction. People do all these multiple complex warm-ups, and then they're like, oh yeah, look I'm feeling real good in my squat right now. Well, it's not that you did all of these fancy movements. It's that you just moved in general, and your temperature's up, your body's more elastic, and now you're moving into this squat easier. So it's not that it doesn't work. It's that the reason provided for why it's working is wrong. 1, 2, it worked, but it's not efficient, right? That 15 minutes you spent rolling around on the ground was 15 minutes of practice in the squat we could have done, which again, that takes a mature vision from the coach, not from the client. It takes a mature vision from the coach to like understand that, like, hey, let's practice the movement right now by warming up the movement. Everyone's like, oh, why aren't you warming up? Aren't you tight? Hell yeah, I'm tight. It's my very first set with the empty bar. Of course I'm tight. I'm warming up. There's nothing on the bar. I'm tight as hell. And that's why I do another set and another set and another set And, 4, 5, 6, 7 sets later of the empty bar, guess what? I'm not tight anymore, and I am mobilized into the movement that I need.
Right.
And a lot of this will come to client variability in terms of, because before everything, it's compliance, right? And you don't want to, I understand that if you're worried about boring your client or you need to switch things up, totally get that. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the issues of trying to make something fancy to highlight yourself when all you're doing is not telling the truth.
Right. And that's just to, once again, just to bring it down to its lowest level. It's because I've been guilty of this myself.
We all have, absolutely. That's why I'm okay talking about it. Yeah, let's make it clear. Like, I'm not high and mighty by any means. We've done it all, and we've just swallowed it and learned from it and moved past it instead of staying in it.
So let me give an example. I have a client who I was asking him what he was doing before he started working with me, and he said something that I have said to myself, at some point in my workout history, and it seems like there's a popular sentiment. So he basically said, he's like, yeah, well, on an average day, I'll get to the gym, I'll do 30 minutes on the elliptical just to get warmed up, and then I'll start going into my routine for the day or whatever. And pretty much, and this, I want to go into this a little bit more in depth when we talk about prioritization, but for me, you don't spend 30 minutes on the elliptical. That's not your warm up.
Right.
Your goal for your warm up, first of all, and this is the way I look at it. You get your overall core temperature up. So that can be, whatever, 1 to 2 minutes, no more than 5 minutes, but, it can be a few minutes of general body movement, whether that's running in place, riding the bike, riding the elliptical machine, whatever you want to do for, 1 to 5 minutes, just to get the core temperature up.
Right.
Then my next priority would be getting the primary movers warmed up. So hips, shoulders, getting those things moving, but even that can happen in the context of what is the workout going to be for that day. And let's do maybe a simplified or an extremely light version of what is today's workout going to be.
Bingo.
That's the best way to warm up. We don't, by no means, and I feel hard pressed to stress this right now, that we do not stretch before we work out. That is a misnomer that I believed for just about my entire fitness career. Stretching serves a purpose, but stretching and warming up are not the same thing.
Right. And stretching is such a generalized, arbitrary term. I mean, everything's stretching. My very first repetition in a squat is a stretch, right? It's everything I need, and that's why I'm doing it. But the other thing, to getting away from the fancy stuff, it's not about like, haha, I'm right, you're wrong, I've moved away from it, this is dumb. One, it's understanding the truer issue, so there's some truth to it, so that you can know better in terms of how to plan out and become better. But two, like, we're trying to educating the client is the priority, and we're trying to move away from the pacifiers, not add more pacifiers, right? I'm not trying to add, like, hey, you shouldn't be coming to exercise, and then after several weeks of exercising, you have 6, 7, 8 more pacifiers of, I've got to do this because I have this problem. You don't go to exercise to find out that you have 10 more problems. No, that one, you don't have those problems. Two, that they're just pacifiers. And the whole purpose of exercise, of performance, preventative medicine, is to reduce the pacifiers, not add to them, right? I'm not trying to make you feel like you're broken. I'm trying to show you how resilient you are. Like, get in there, get your warm up in, get focused. You want to do something other than the movement for your warm up, fine. Like I get it. Some people like need some variety for spice and all that. Totally cool, right? Again, compliance is number one. But let's just, we have to make sure that the mindset is appropriate, right? Understanding the truth and keeping that resilient mind for appropriate training.
Right.
So, but that kind of leads me into the focus should be on progression of exercises, not variety of exercises. But the variety of exercises and the correctives out there, like I said, they're a distraction to just allowing the client and yourself to work on things that aren't perfect nor are going to be perfect, right? And I just recently, in the last 2 weeks, I had a client I was working with, and it was really good and really eye-opening for her, and she was really receptive, which was awesome. But she came up, she told me, like, because she followed FMS screening and all this stuff, everything's got her boxed in, and this screening told me this and this screening told me that. And because of and here's where the problem lies with following these correctives, is because of the poison that it brings. And so anyway, she told me, this corrective exercise and this FMS told me this, and it put her in this box for everything. And she never got outside of the box because of all these correctives, because of this bogus screening test. And for 10 years, she never thought she could squat. She's like, let me show you my squat. It's like, this is how I do it. It's like, well, that's because why are you squatting like that? It's like, because that's how it's done, because that's how the screening told me. Because if I squat outside of this, then it's going to make my screen numbers go down, and I'm going to have potential for injury. And told her how much bogus that was and showed her the evidence. And I was like, look, we need to get you to squat how you squat. And, it took a lot of, one, education, but two, trust, right? You don't want to just tell this person they're dumb for believing this, because then you just push them away, right? You understand and realize that they're not. They're just a product of what they've been around. And it's the issue of these larger companies and these screenings. But, I took her out and showed her how to squat, and it wasn't perfect the first day, but she was able to squat to depth. Like, when I say to depth, like a fuller range of motion than what she was restricted to before. And she was just blown away. She's like, this is like totally not within the screening limits and all this stuff. And that kind of sums up what happened with her, summed up my entire frustration with this community of correctives and screenings. Is it did the complete opposite of what our priority should be. Is it hindered her from moving, it hindered her from working out. The only thing screening does is screw with her mind and screw with people's minds. You don't need to be, especially if you're not a medical professional, you don't need to be telling people, hey, because of this screening you have X, Y, and Z issue. The only thing that did was screw with their mind. They probably didn't have the issue to begin with. And you just prevented them from, a high quality life of movement. And I've just got a real issue with the FMS screening in particular. One, the evidence out there is completely against it. There's no association between FMS scoring and exercise injury or sport injury. You can cheat the FMS test just by practicing it and throw your numbers way off. That's tested and verified in the literature. And then 3, you put people in boxes rather than accommodating for anthropometrics. And lastly, these isolated screening movements have no association to system-wide movements, right? How my rotator cuff moves in the FMS screen has zero, and I mean certified zero, correlation to how I'm going to press overhead, right? And so they try to cross all these bridges that have no support to them, And all they do is screw with the client's mind with showing them what's potentially wrong with them. And the only thing that the FMS really does a good job at is and it's funny how this works. I mean, this may be being senile, but it creates a nice little checklist of things that you need to sell the person on. Hey, you've got this, and this wrong with you. So let's work on this, instead of focusing on getting them to move and getting them healthy, and giving them a resilient mind and educating them. You've made them paranoid. You've gave them a list of arbitrary problems that they never knew was wrong with them because it's not wrong with them. Oh, by the way, your test isn't even valid and it can be cheated. Like that's the most frustrating thing in the world is to deal with these screenings and these FMSs. And then I have patients or clients like the one I just told you about that thought they couldn't do something for years just because of what a screening put them in. So super liberating and super eye-opening for her, and it felt really good to be able to break her away from that understanding and show her anthropometrics and coaching rather than arbitrary unsubstantiated screenings.
Right.
And it was awesome that I got to break her away. But then it just a few minutes later, it's like, man, how many more thousands of people are out there, victims of screenings and not pushing themselves to their fullest potential, because paranoia is a heck of a thing. And let me tell you what, there is literature, there is evidence on your perception and the results of how you perform, the results of injury rates. So you want to talk about real evidence. Well, what you're doing with the person by telling them all these bogus statements, I have a real issue with, and that definitely puts a hindrance on me as a coach and a professional trying to progress somebody, is because these screenings put up a big block for us.
Right. So if I can jump in real quick.
Yep, I went on another tangent, man. Bring me back in.
No, it's all good. I wanna make what might be a bold statement, but
go for it.
Like we said, for the sake of simplicity. So I haven't even thought this through. I'm just gonna say it. But let's say that I made a statement that the goal of all training, the goal of all movement is to move better, is to enjoy quality of life, that is what we're all striving for.
Or the athlete's trying to increase performance. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So that is
improving who they are.
Right. So we're the reason why we train, the reason why we move is as simple as it sounds, so that we can move better, we can move more efficiently, we can stop some of the degenerative things that happen as we age. It allows us to enjoy a quality of life. It enjoys us to continue moving the way that we want to be able to move. That is, if we could sum up all training in one sentence, that's how we might sum it up. It's oversimplified, of course, but that's
the theme. Yeah.
It's a general theme. So if I'm hearing you correctly, the issue with some of these screenings and assessments is that, well, a couple things, but first and foremost, it doesn't help us move better. It actually limits what we're able to do. So that's issue number one, that some of these assessments, instead of improving our ability to move or improving our quality of life, now it kind of gives us an excuse not to improve.
That's the thing. Excuses, right.
So that's number one. Number two, some of these assessments and screenings only make you better at doing the assessment or the screen.
Bingo. Nailing it on the head.
And then we have to question, does that screen predictably transfer into something else that we want to be able to do? And as you say, it's all anecdotal. There's not any real scientific evidence that shows that this screen effectively helps me do that movement. It's
Right.
like this screen helps me do this screen,
Right.
and that's
Right.
all there is to it. So, the correlation between this screen or this assessment and some actual function of life, that some movement that I have to do during life, is not necessarily there.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's not there.
Right. Right.
uh, and it's frustrating um, because of just how uh, popularized and how just rooted it is in the fitness and performance industry now. FMS is sticking around because they've made their imprint, so it doesn't matter what the literature says. It doesn't matter. It the evidence is null and void at this point, just because they've already got their foot in the door.
Right.
So the best we can do is educate those, so that they know to steer clear, and that they know to have a resilient mind and to focus on movements rather than screenings that have no weight to them.
So on that note, we painted the picture of how we feel personally about this stuff. So what, if any, is the value of these screenings? What is the value of the assessments? What is, for the client, for the consumer that has heard from so many different sources, to now they believe in the quality of these screenings, or in the value to their life? Like, what if anything is the value of it? Like, can you look at the other side and say,
Yep.
hey, well, it doesn't do what it says that it's really gonna do, but it is good for whatever. Like, is
Sure. And my answer to that is I want people steering clear of the FMS. It's not establishing a strong mindset, an appropriate mindset that I want to promote. It goes against my philosophy of trying to let people know that they're resilient. It distracts from trying to focus on larger movements. It distracts from implementing exercises that have no reason to be to not be implemented, and its prediction for injury is literally null and void. I mean, the prediction for injury is greater in flipping a coin than it is with the FMS test. So I don't want them doing the FMS because there's a stronger possibility that it's going to make the person paranoid rather than give me anything hard evidence to go off of. So I truly, like, even outside of my bias, I know it's hard. I hate being absolute on things because it can sometimes take away your validity, if you know what I mean. But the fact of the matter is that I steer clear of FMS, and it doesn't. There's no outcomes that I associate positively with. So I steer my clients away.
okay. So if not FMS, just to play devil's advocate.
Sure. No, this is what we need. This is
Right. So new client comes to you.
Yep.
Even before you can really write a program for them, before you can throw them into a routine, if not FMS, what do you want to see in a new client before you start trying to write programming for them?
I just got to see how they move. I mean, and that comes from everything from how they walk in the door to I mean, everything is evaluated when they're with me for that first hour. I mean, do they even, and when I mean everything, language, do they know what I'm talking about when I say, hey, let's go try a squat out? Are they breathing really heavy just by moving this box over here? You know, when we went to move a barbell, was it a huge struggle for them to move this? Everything is being evaluated when we initially start off, and this just comes a lot from experience. I know, like, hey, can we go straight to the rack, or like, hey, do we need to go to the TRX and hold on to something? I can usually judge that right off the bat just with how this is going to go down. And then I just start having them move on their own. We'll start squatting just because it's a major fundamental movement. We'll spend a lot of time on the squat because and here's the thing. When you spend a lot of time on a major movement, 10,000 other things get fixed. You know what I'm saying? Like, when somebody is wobbly, is in a complete mess and has no idea how to put their butt down and squat, and you take 25, 35 minutes on that one movement, again, having that mature vision, and you hone it in and you're patient with them, you take your time and you're working on this movement and you're showing them that it's the severity of it. One, it's a workout, but two, I've fixed 15 other movements, smaller, subtle movements, just by, getting them aware and to squat properly. And then after, squatting, if we got time, we'll try pressing. We'll just be doing a lot of huge, large human movements. And then again, by the time we're done practicing this stuff, if they're gassed and completely smoked, well, then I know they're real deconditioned. If they're feeling all right, we might go to the prowler. I might have them walk with the prowler, talk to them about, treat it as if they're mowing the lawn or something like that. It's all dependent on where they're at. Now, conversely, if it's an advanced athlete, we're going through the same routine, right? And this is where fundamentals just get overlooked. We think, oh, D1 athlete, he knows how to squat. Heck, no, he doesn't. No, he does not. We're going through the squat. Now, we may not start with my athlete holding onto the TRX. We might move to the barbell really quick. But even then, we might stop because X, Y, and Z is wrong. He may have a heck of a press, but there might be X, Y, and Z to fix and work on and coach with. And he may be in shape, but I'm going to be able to make that prowler work out hard enough to where I, can see his conditioning level. So advanced or complete beginner, what I'm looking for is the same. It's the progression and the titration, which is going to be different, right? So that gives me a lot of information. Just seeing how somebody moves. No isolated movement's going to do that. No boxed in screening test is going to do that. I need to see what the individual is like, how they're moving, what their knowledge base is, how they're ticking. There's 1,000 factors that need to take into place, and FMS has no place for it for the purpose of performance and health.
Okay, so still playing devil's advocate.
Go for it. Keep it going.
I'm listening to this podcast. I'm a trainer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say, for the sake of argument, I'm a fairly new trainer,
mm-hmm.
and I'm listening to you, and I like what you're saying. You convinced me to throw out the FMS, but at the same time, you just told me that the assessment of a new client or a new athlete, that I have to be you. I have to be a person with 10, 15 years of experience in order to assess a new client that comes to me. Well, I don't have 10 to 15 years, so I'm just going to read this FMS book, and I'm going to take this new client through FMS, because to the client, I look like I know what I'm doing because I know FMS. So what do you say to that new trainer, to that person that's just getting their feet wet, or even to the old trainer who also likes what you're saying? They're questioning the use of assessments, but at the same time, they don't have 10 or 15 years worth of quality experience to build off of.
Yeah,
how do I take this? What do I do when this new client comes to me and wants to start training?
That's a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up. They're going to do the same thing that I do 10 years later, is that I am still learning, right? The people, I've never seen this person before in my life. And I literally have to figure them out. I'm just poking and prodding. How do they need to squat? Guess what? I have no idea. I have no idea how this person needs to squat. I'm going to take a good guesstimate. We got to start somewhere, right? Literally, the first session with a brand new client is figuring them out. And yes, I have experience to pull from, but 10 years prior, I had to figure everyone out, right? So the only difference between me 10 years ago and me now is that 10 years ago, I had to figure out everybody, and I was a dry sponge soaking up, oh, hey, this worked. Oh, hey, this cue worked. Oh, hey, this cue worked for this person, but not for this person. Now nothing changes. I still have a bank to pull from, but every once in a while, there's this person like, man, that there's something with this person I can't figure out, and it becomes trial and error. Like you've got to develop your bank, and that's why the art of coaching is it's a use or lose skill. There is no like, oh, I'm a coach. Oh, hey, I used to do this years ago. No, absolutely not. If you are not keeping your coach's eye honed in, or if you don't ever have it, or you never had it, or you never understood it or had the appreciation for it, you have no idea what you're missing out on. And an FMS test is a perfect example of not having a coach's eye, because you're relying on boxed in numbers that have no correlation to who you're dealing with. So no, that's a really good question, is the fact that you're going to do what I've been doing from day one till now is I am learning this person just like anyone else.
Right.
You've got to start with your basic explanations. You've got to start somewhere, like, hey, this is a squat. Hey, this is a press. Hey, this is how we push a prowler. Hey, this is what it's going to feel like. You start with that general education, and then how they respond to it, you tweak your follow-up responses. So for one client, I'll tell them, hey, you need to drive your hip up. You need to let your chest fall forward in a squat, right? That'll get that client to do the squat properly. The next client, I'll be like, hey, you need to crank that chest up. You need to tuck your hips down way low. I told them the complete 180 opposite of that other client just to do the exact same movement, right? And the only way you're going to know is to figure them out.
Right.
And figuring them out is being a coach, and not the only way to get 10 years of experience is to coach for 10 years. But that was, that's the fun part, is being that dry sponge and just like, oh man, this worked. Oh, that was so cool that I figured this out. And it's still fun when you get that hard client. I love my deconditioned clients. I love my clients that don't have a clue, because they're the hardest ones to coach. They take the most skill from you. High level athletes, a lot of them aren't coached just because of the nature of where they're at and stuff. But, I get a high level athletes. Yeah, it's fun to coach him, but it's easy, man. I mean, he or she is bodily aware. Hey, do this. I don't have to touch them. I don't have to do anything. I can just bark commands and automatically fix them. It's tends to be easy a lot, but yeah, that's a really good question. You've got to just know them, right? It's there's no way around it. There's no test that's going to help you out with that. That's the art of coaching.
Right. From the point of view of the coach, that the coach is always learning. The coach is always trying to solve the puzzle, always trying to look and tweak and correct, and you start to learn processes that work. And of course you store those away in your tool bag, but at the same time, each client is a brand new client.
Absolutely. Man, you hit that's another perfect thing. That's with coaching, but it's also with programming and understanding how that individual adapts. My buddy that I'm programming for, me and him are head to head on the deadlift right now, right? We have essentially the same deadlift numbers. my program and his program, our numbers don't line up at all. I mean, he is, and it's just because I've taken the time to figure him out and taken the time to figure myself out. I mean, he's at a 500-pound deadlift. I'm at a 500-pound deadlift. Like right now, at the same time, he's working his working weights. He can handle intensity a lot better than I can. He's working in the 400s, which is, low 80%, and I'm working in the low 70%, right? We both have a 500-pound deadlift. I can't handle intensity like he can, but I can display intensity really well. So I'm working at 70%. I'm working in the 300s and able to display 500, whereas he can handle higher intensities, but can't display as well as me. So his working weights are 400. My working weights are 300s. We both have the same 1 rep max. So if all we were to look at is the same 1 rep max, if we were to just box ourselves in, we should have the same program, but we don't because we respond differently.
And on that, that's a nice throwback to our last podcast about the stress and adaptation cycle. So for your buddy, if he was to do your workout, so if he trains for the next 8 weeks at 70% of 1 rep max, then he won't have the same gains that you have.
Absolutely. He would get deconditioned probably.
Right. He needs that higher level of intensity in order to grow. So that's where we respect the 1 rep max, but at the same time, the training has to be specific to that athlete.
Right.
By the same token, if you try to do his workout, you might overtrain, or you might be at
I'd just burn out. I'd tap out. I'm done.
Right.
I ain't doing this. It's too hard.
Right. Because now you're taking on a greater amount of physical stress, a greater amount of mental stress. You're putting yourself at a greater risk of injury. You're putting yourself at a place where you may not experience the same gains that you would experience. So now we have to bring you as the athlete back to 70%. And
priority number 1, if I'm on that program, compliance just went in the tank. Like, I don't want to do this.
Right.
If I don't want to do it, then what a waste of time.
Right.
I'm not going to get what I want out of you if you're not, even if you have that mentality and you still do it, it's not the effort we need.
Right. So much to unpack there, but yeah.
We'll be talking for days, man.
Right.
Let me shoot a question at you, and then we'll take it from there. We'll kind of switch gears, but still staying on this whole exercise selection talk, this whole progression talk. I'll answer this question, and then I'll let you answer it. Most overrated exercise.
Okay.
For me, the most overrated exercise out there is the overhead squat. And I hate to go back to dogging it, but it's got this, I don't know why or where. I think it just kind of happened over time, but this overhead squat's now got this association with like high functionality and screenings. And if you can overhead squat, then you're good. Or if your overhead squat looks like this, then you have this issue. The overhead squat works the core. The overhead squat, is this, that, and the other. And quite frankly, not everyone can overhead squat. Number one, like point blank period. Your people's anthropometrics don't allow them to overhead squat the best. So, it has so much hype behind it, but it has so little utility across the board. It's not going to make you stronger. It's too, for my strong guys, it's not going to make them stronger because it's too submaximal. For my weak people, it's too complex, so they can't comply to it. For those with poor anthropometrics, they can't get a full range of motion, so they can't get a stimulus. I have no when I think about this, I'm thinking about it like trying to program it, and I have no place. I mean, even my Olympic weightlifters, my guys that are awesome at snatching, and I'm not alone in this. What Olympic weightlifter overhead squats? They rarely, right? The one people who have the sport of the overhead squat involved. How when you were training with Steve, how often did you have like overhead squats as a working? Like you might practice it, you might warm up with it, you might do some drills with it. You never had the overhead squat as a working set.
That's true. And to be perfectly honest, when you said that, it caught me off guard. I was about to start defending the overhead squat.
Go for it. No, that'll make for good conversation.
No, this goes the overhead squat for me because what you said just summed it up. In my Olympic training, that was never a primary movement. I like
for the record, like when we're talking your training, we're not talking like you messing around with the Olympic lifts. We're talking you training with a level 3 senior Olympic weightlifting coach, for the record, so that we can add some potency to what you're about to say.
Just to add some credibility to it. So yeah, I was training with my coach, and I still do. He's a national Olympic trainer, a national level Olympic coach, so, and that the overhead squat was over the course of a year. I don't think it was ever in the program.
Not even once, huh?
I don't think so.
No surprise.
Now I did it, and I still like the movement just because it's challenging.
Sure.
So as far as and I've
good warm up drill.
Right. It's good for warm up, or it's good for, and this is something else you and I have talked about, just some volume work.
There you go. Sure.
If I'm doing a barbell complex, I'll throw in some overhead squats just because at that point, at that level of fatigue, I'm not going heavy at all. But
transferability, some good practice.
Right. And the bar is already overhead because I just did some presses or some push presses. The bar is already overhead. Let me just transition as part of my complex routine into some overhead squats. Just
absolutely.
So
specific to you and your context during your Olympic training, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, but I agree with you. I agree. It has a certain, for lack of a better word, a certain sexiness to it.
No, that's really good. Yeah, that's what I think it is.
It's hard, and it challenges you on so many different levels.
It's sexy, but then you see all these like people with a bunch of letters after their last name doing it, and talking about complexity. Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Right, because if you look at it, in terms of the sexiness factor, it's challenging on upper body mobility, it's challenging on lower body mobility, and it's challenging to the core. I mean, I can see the appeal for people to try and push that as a movement, like, hey, I can improve your overhead squat. Come train with me, or look at how much I overhead squat.
Sure.
So it's that's good stuff.
So throwing it back at you then, putting you on the spot.
Throwing it back at me, and this is a throwback to
most overrated exercise for you.
Yeah, this is a throwback to back in the day, and I'm not gonna throw it back to my age or anything like that, but when I was growing up, and this may very well still be the case, but when I was growing up, everybody in the gym lifted like a bodybuilder. Everybody. The Muscle and Fitness was the Bible to us. So,
that was a strength and conditioning manual, was the magazine Muscle Fitness.
Right. That was the Bible. It's like, no, man, I mean, we high school, we'd get in fights. No, I read this in Muscle and Fitness. And it's like, oh, okay, so it has to be true.
That's it, yeah.
Right. So just as
Jay
a
Cutler approved it, man. You were good.
right. So just as a throwback, my most overrated exercise would have to be any variation on the pec fly, but I would say more specifically like the cable fly.
Okay. Yeah.
Like
Definitely. Tell
it
me why.
it looks impressive if I'm jacked and I'm ripped and I'm working out shirtless and I'm on the cable machine, and that you get all the separation. You see my huge expanded chest. You get the serratus in there. You see my chiseled arms. Like it is just it's the epitome of every mirror muscle at its finest is displayed on the pec fly and on the cable fly.
That's a really good one. I didn't think I thought you were gonna take an easy cop out and say like the bicep curl or something like that. But no, pec fly is the way I would describe pec fly. That's a really good one you picked. A very high level of display,
Right.
a low level of function.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's really good.
Right. So, for the sake of questions, so I'll throw it back at you. We talked about the most overrated exercise.
Yep.
I want to talk about the most underrated or underappreciated exercise.
All right.
And I'm just gonna jump in there. To me, the most underappreciated exercise of all time is the deadlift.
Okay. Tell me why.
It's just the barbell deadlift. Why? Because we tend to think, and I saw a graphic somewhere, and I wish I could remember where, but the graphic it showed kind of a diagram of a lifter, and it showed like in red the part of the body that was working. So the lifter was down in the, over the bar in a deadlift, and it said, this is what we think the deadlift works. So obviously all the lower body was red.
Uh-huh.
And then the diagram showed the bodybuilder kind of in full extension at the completion of the lift, and the whole body was red. So, and that's just that's a very simplistic way of saying that the deadlift works everything.
Right.
Everything in the kinetic chain is worked by that one movement. So,
absolutely.
As much as I and we talked about the 4 basic movements, and that's a whole separate discussion by itself. So, and I don't want to steal your answer, but so I won't go into what I think the second best is. But
sure.
To me, by far, if ever I got to a point where whether I had a client or even for myself, and I said, okay, what is the most value? What is the exercise that I can get the absolute most bang for my buck? I would say it's the deadlift.
Definitely.
Barbell, just as simple as that sounds, just a simple barbell deadlift.
Yeah, there's a lot of high function to it. You can get almost anyone to do it. There's so many variations to it that you can get anyone to do it, really. But yeah, with the deadlift in my programming, it's so critical, and I appreciate its stimulus so much that it actually affects my upper back programming. So a lot of people, I get some critiques from my programming because there's not a lot of upper back work in it, and it's because I accommodate for the fact of the deadlift. And again, this goes back to focusing on progressions. Like the clients that I have, and from of all age groups and sex and whatever, for who they are so strong. The deadlift is so stimulating on them that it is 100% taken into account as upper back work. And people that don't understand the value of what the deadlift does for the upper back, I've never gotten anyone strong on the deadlift. And people preach movements and things like that, but we got to go back to understanding like the purpose of being in the gym is for development, not for displaying a whole bunch. So if I need back development, I'm not worried about how many pull-ups I'm getting in or rows or anything. I'm just worried about total volume on the upper back, and the deadlift takes a huge chunk of upper back volume. And in fact, during heavy deadlift training sessions, I will make sure that the day or two prior that there was little to no upper back work, just because of how critically it can affect the deadlift, and how much the deadlift affects the upper back. I mean, yeah, it's full body. I mean, people that say, that think that you need to work the core in isolation have never deadlifted heavy enough. I mean, it's truly a killer. And I do think there are a lot of pieces to the deadlift that are 100% undervalued. How much the core works, how much the upper back works, the system-wide stimulation, definitely all underrated. And even those that like the deadlift, I still don't think fully appreciate its value.
And I'll add a piece to that. I had a PT session this morning, and I was taking a client, and she is a relatively novice lifter, and she made a comment, something along the lines of, yeah, I'm really feeling this in my forearms, or I'm feeling this in yada yada, whatever it was. And
right.
So basically what I told her, I said, we lift or we program to the weakest link. So,
right. Excellent. Really good statement. I'm probably going to steal that from you. Keep going with that.
Yeah. Like we program to the weakest link. And that's why I'm not a big fan of straps. I'm not a big fan of any of the things that we use to assist our weak links and allow us to go heavier. Now, there is a place for that.
Sure. Yep.
Absolutely, there is a place for straps and wraps and all of that. There is a place for it, but 9 times out of 10,
especially a beginner.
Right. 9 times out of 10, and probably 10 times out of 10 for a beginner, we work to the weakest link, because as we strengthen that link, then everything else gets stronger. So
yeah.
To throw that back to what you said about the deadlift, it may be seen as primarily a lower body movement. Okay, so once the legs get burned out, then we're able to see how much it affects the upper back. Then we're able to see how much it affects the core.
Right.
And we
only get to that point, though. Again, the mature vision of working people towards that.
Right. Yeah. So at some point, once we burn our legs out, and this is where we go back to what you said earlier about just the experience that we have as coaches and the variations. This is why we have to, there's so much complexity to those 4 movements, because now I can make a slight variation in my client's deadlift, and now I can say, okay, this uses your legs less, and it allows us to put more stress on this other component in the kinetic chain.
Bingo.
So that we can start strengthening that. So that's where things get incredibly complex, and as coaches, we have to bring it down to a basic level.
Right. You nailed it on the head. Program to the weakest link really brought out this other point for me, is that I'll get somebody to do a movement, and it's popular. It's been popularized, and I try to pull away from this at all costs. And that is, I do not care one bit where you feel this, right? Oh, I'm and the go-to is like, oh, I'm feeling this in my low back, and everyone freaks out. Oh, we got to stop doing it. Like I don't care where you feel it, because you're feeling it wherever you're weakest at. Aren't I supposed to be feeling this in my hamstrings? Are you feeling your hamstrings? No. Okay, then that's fine, right? It's not that they're not being used. It's not that they're not being engaged. It's that your hamstrings aren't as stressed as another part of you. That's a whole nother rabbit hole I want to go down at another time. But getting people away from this mindset of where should I be feeling this at? Like where you feel it is irrelevant, pending you're doing everything right. You're going to feel it where you have the most struggle with, right? I may feel it a lot in my hamstrings. Does that mean my hamstrings are working more? No. It's just in comparison to you. No, not necessarily. I mean, there isn't this like amnesia of my muscles. They're all working. They're all being used. It's that we have so much variation in who we are that where I feel it is completely irrelevant. As long as the movement's progressing and being done right, you're going to feel it where you feel it, and that's all there is to it.
Right. Right.
So yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Right. So what is your most underappreciated exercise?
Yeah. So we kind of touched on it for a lot of reasons already, but it was more just for an example. But it's the squat. And when I say squat, I'll get more specific, the air squat.
Mm-hmm.
And to start this all over is that the coaches in today's world, the assumption of the fundamentals is so huge that it's completely glassed over, and we just tell people to squat. And there's no, like I said, I don't care if you're the advanced athlete or a brand new beginner. I could probably spend 45 minutes working on your squat and getting things right and critiquing and seeing where things break down. And fixing this squat will fix 10,000 other movements, right? But the society's got it backwards. We do 10,000 exercises to try and fix these 4 main exercises. It's ass backwards. We fix these 4 main exercises, and when I fix these 4 main exercises, these 10,000 other exercises are done completely great. I mean, it drives me off the wall when somebody can barely air squat and then they're gone to do like a single leg Romanian deadlift, and you see them just looking like a jackass. But you get somebody to, who's never done any of the fancy stuff before, but they got a 300-pound squat, 400 dead, 250 bench, whatever, just some okay numbers for average Joe. You tell them to go do one of these other exercises, he or she's going to struggle at first, like, oh, this is weird, this is new, but then they're just going to knock it out, right? They've got a development to it. We fix the 4 exercises, we focus on the 4 exercises because they transfer to the 10,000 other exercises, and how you want to display that ability is on you, and that's sport specificity, and that's a whole nother realm. But we don't bring the correctives and the 10,000 exercises in the sport and try to infect basic movements with them. It's ass backwards. We gotta get the fundamentals down. We gotta appreciate the complexity to the fundamentals, and we have to progress the fundamentals and add in accessories as needed.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
the air squat's completely underrated.
Okay, so on that topic, like I said, just playing devil's advocate.
Yes, do it. This is my favorite game.
Right. I've read somewhere, and I wish I could remember where, but I read someone's work, and they were an advocate of body weight work.
Uh-huh.
So that's what they did. That was their specialty. They wrote body weight programs. So,
sure.
So they made a bold statement somewhere along the lines of, if this athlete cannot move properly using their own body weight, then they don't need any external loading. So I know it's a bold statement. Like I said,
sure.
Like devil's advocate. So let me hear what you have to think about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we got to unwrap that statement. That's a pretty arbitrary statement that he made. So I would question him on what he thinks, or why he's saying an athlete can't move his own body weight properly. What's his justification of properly? And what is, I mean, if he's lifting weights and he's looking good and things are progressing, there's no issue. If he's saying he's not moving properly for his skill, well, I mean, that's his football coach that needs to work on that or something. But if the guy's able to load and he's progressing, we have form for efficiency's sake more than like injury and things like that, right? We always want somebody to lift perfectly and good because we want them to lift the most efficient we can, but it's the program, it's the progression that's going to keep them from getting injured. So somebody says they need to get their body weight moving correctly first? Well, it's either what does that mean? And then I need to dive into that, or it's well, yeah, no duh. Like I'm not going to load the guy until he's got his air squat down. Like I'm not going to get him to use a barbell until his air squat's down. I mean,
so let me throw this out, and like I said, just for the sake of discussion. So
yeah, no, these. Trust me, I love these.
so we have a guy, just knocking it out. 400 back squat,
Uh-huh.
and I come along and say, okay, that 400-pound back squat isn't what we think it is because he can't do 10 pistols.
Oh.
So, and you kind of already talked about it. And for anyone listening who doesn't understand, okay, the pistol squat, one leg squat, all the way down and all the way back up. So,
yeah, so they're much, yeah, that's a really good comparison. So my statement is that that person completely misses the point. And that's really good because that's an overarching thing that I continually want to have is why we are resistance training, why we are lifting weights. That is to create progression, right? That is to create adaptation. That is to create structural changes in the body. If you can't do a pistol squat, that's specificity. That's fluff. That's a display, not a developmental process. If he can't do a pistol squat, there could be 1,000 reasons. If he's squatting 400 pounds and he's doing it well and he's progressing it, that's what matters because I'm not concerned with the fact that he can do a pistol squat. I'm concerned with the fact that his bones are denser. He's got more cross-sectional area in his muscle to display on the field. He's got more work capacity. He's got more glycogen increased to use and display in practice, right? We need to understand that we're in the weight room for the sake of development, not for the sake of the weights, which gets, that is 100% going to be a podcast in and of its own very, very soon because there is so much abuse by coaches bringing the sport into the weight room or by people trying to interject like, hey, you should be able to do these things in the weight room. The weight room is for one thing. It's for the weights. It's for progression. It's for increasing your capability to drive an adaptation. The ultimate goal is an adaptation on the body, right? What you do with that adaptation is your business, right? You got stronger, awesome. You want to go practice pistol squats, awesome. You want to go practice football, you want to go practice baseball, you want to go practice CrossFit, cool, do what you want with this strength. But when you're in the weight room, our focus is going to be on the weights. It's going to be on titrations up so that we can get the biology down, right? There's too much focus on the display and the shiny objects, and we've lost the biology. And the biology is denser bones, thicker muscle tissue, more glycogen, better nervous system, right? When I give you a raw athlete who has better bone density than this athlete, more musculature than this athlete, more glycogen storage than this athlete, this raw athlete who has more of his raw ability is always going to outperform this athlete. He just needs to practice, right? And so that's the whole reason for being in the gym. Like arbitrary statements of, you need to be able to do body weight, this, that, and the other. You need to be able to perform all these displays misses the point because one, not everyone can do all these things. Two, we need to focus on what they can do and hunker down on it and progress it so that we can get the most adaptation out of the body, right? I'm trying to drive the body's potential up, not its display, right? The gym is for potential, not display. Display is for whatever you're trying to do outside of the gym. The gym is for potential.
So just for the sake of discussion, just sum that up one more time. What's our main motivation in the gym? What's the
gym is there to drive adaptation, right? To create structural changes on the body. The biology of the body must improve, right? And we can't distract that with trying to turn the gym into a sport. The gym is only for 3 sports: weightlifting, powerlifting, and CrossFit, right? Those are the only sports that actually require the gym as a gym. All others are for health and performance. So your priority is to get stronger, faster, and more conditioned, right? And what you do with that strength and that conditioning is up to you to display elsewhere. But the gym is to make the adaptation process. The gym is for progression, right? The program. That's where, and if we get that fundamental understanding that we're in the gym to progress, that we're in the gym to increase general abilities, if we keep that mentality, then everything else is going to clear up, right? We won't be distracted by a whole bunch of other nonsense, like people saying we need to be able to do X, Y, and Z if we're in the gym. Like, no, you need to be able to do what the only thing you need to be able to do in the gym is do more than you did last time. Boom. That's the best way to sum it up. The only thing you need to be able to do in the gym is more than what you did last time. However that may be, whatever that titration is. That's the purpose for the gym.
So just so I can wrap my head around it, the purpose of the gym is to drive adaptation, to drive progression, but more specifically is to drive adaptation and progression as long as someone else is there to witness it. Because if someone is not there watching, then it didn't happen. And if they're not there with a fully charged cell phone recording, then all bets are off. You know?
No, if you didn't video it, it didn't happen. That's why I tell all my athletes, you didn't hit that PR, you didn't video it.
Right.
That mentality will take you a long ways in terms of keeping a clear, focused mind. If you can always remember that, then you won't have. Because I mean, you see this all over Instagram. Like the performance world is poisoned with like the strength coaches trying to act like the football, baseball coach, and hockey coach all wrapped into one by all these ridiculous drills, and then you got your boot camper trying to say that you need to be able to do this, that, and the other, and everyone's just trying to bastardize the poor gym. The gym just wants to be left alone.
Right. That's we've covered so much. You have any closing thoughts you just want to throw out there?
No. I mean,
summed it up. I mean, that pretty much says it all.
I think before I say anything stupid, I want to leave it at that. The gym is the only thing that you need to be able to do in the gym is be better than the day before.
Right. And that mentality on a day-to-day basis, that'll take us to wherever we need to go. That's right. And I just, if I had to wrap up everything that we've talked about today, I would say simpler is better. Simplicity. What is the simple solution to it? I would even combine it with what you said. What is the simplest path to adaptation and progress? And let's go with that. And if that doesn't get us to where we want to be, then we'll try something different. And that's always part of the program. We're always trying to adapt. We're always trying to try new things. We're always getting better. This doesn't work, or this worked yesterday. It doesn't work today. Okay, we have to try something different. And so that's always a factor that we have to be mindful of. But I'm just, in everything I do, simple is better than complex.
Sure. Yeah, simple. Definitely. It's simple for the client. Like even if it has to be complex for you, because at times it will be, you display it for the client to be simple, so that they can when it's simple, you can drive harder, you can push forward harder. You're not trying to spread yourself thin. You're collective in your focus, and thus a more potent push.
Right.
So you always want to give what you have in the simplest manner.
Right.
I agree.
Well, all right, man. I think we need to wrap up there. I mean,
man. What were we at? Like 2 hours or something?
Something like that. So we'll wrap it up there, and we'll be back. We'll be back again.
Awesome.
All right, man.
Cool.